I like to talk about the S in SERVE, strategy. There's a lot of things I try to do to put the strategy of the organization out front. For example, when we do our corporate operating plan every year, we take from the strategy what are the key priorities that we should be focusing on this year that leads us to achieving that strategy. That gets us to focus as an organization. What's on the corporate operating plan are the most important things to get done. And how that is supported is when we look at funding. We figure out what's our estimated unrestricted budget for the year. How much do you think we're going to raise? And we fund the strategy first before we fund everything else in the organization. And even though the strategy budget every year is a small percent of the overall budget, if we didn't fund it first, it could get lost in everything else and it would not get the focus that it needs to have. So I think putting the strategy front by putting the milestones in the strategy as our key success measures for the year and then funding that first is a real important way I try to lead with that S from SERVE. But another thing I try to do, which is really hard for me to do sometimes, and I feel like sometimes I'm biting my nails or whatever, is I go around to a lot of interesting meetings and hear a lot of interesting things that are going on in our sector. I read or I just come up with my own thinking. And I think of some neat things that we could be doing that could really be exciting stuff. But I know sometimes that might take us down another path that would take us off really focusing on what we said the priorities of the strategy are for the year. So I try to bite my tongue and keep those things in and figure out when would be the best time to put them in. Trying not to get the organization focused in a different path than it should be. And that's really important, I think, for leaders in the organization, be it myself as a CEO or the VP of a business unit or the national director of a country office. We carry a lot of weight with our staff. So if we say, hey, this is really important, let's do it, it's more important than anything else, or this is a really cool, neat idea and let's try it, and it brings people off down a different path, they'll do it because we're the leader. So it's really important that we try to keep ourselves and our staff focused on those key things that are on the strategy, which are on our operating plan. I would say another SERVE principle I'll mention that has grown in importance and understanding for me in the last couple of years is the R, the one on risks and managing risks. When I first kind of got introduced to the concept of risk management, I used to think of it in negative terms. I used to think of why do we want to sit there and brainstorm about all the things that could possibly go wrong. To me, it was a little bit of a downer. Now I think if it's a really smart thing to do, to really think of all the potential risks out there that could keep us off achievement, that would stop us from really going after what we want to go after. And if we manage them, if we identify them up front, then we can proactively manage them to reduce the possibility of them impacting on us. So before, when I used to think of the R, risk, in terms of a negative thing, now I think of it much more as a positive thing. And when I look back in my career in Child Fund, when I think of the 2 or 3 things that I was really unhappy with the way something played out, when all of a sudden something in my world, in my vision, happened, and that kind of waylaid what we wanted to do, it's always because I hadn't early on identified that risk. And if I had, and got people to work on it, I think the impact of that wouldn't have been as bad as it ended up being. So the S in terms of strategy and SERVE is really important to me and the way I lead as a leader. And the R in terms of risk management is another thing that I've embraced and learned to see as a really positive thing for us as an organization.
Well, strategy played a critical role in what we accomplished in Kenya. First and foremost, it provided us with a framework of what we needed to achieve. The strategy articulated what we needed to achieve over a particular period of time. We were very certain as a team. We had very clear strategic targets that we needed to achieve. So strategy helped us as a team. First of all, we socialized with the strategy to ensure that all team members were aware of the respective targets that we needed to achieve. Further, we went ahead to ensure that we developed a charter, a management charter, that helped each team member, each senior team member, to commit to those aspects that they were responsible for in the achieving of the strategy. Frankly, without the strategy, we possibly would not have had a clear focus of those specific organizational objectives that we were required to accomplish. So strategy was extremely helpful. A couple of things that strategy helped us with was we knew where we wanted to go. We came up with a structure that supported where we wanted, the objectives that we wanted to achieve. And thirdly, we were working on systems that helped us to ensure that we had a good strategy, appropriate structures, and effective systems that helped us to achieve what we did. That represented what I would call the hardware part of the strategy. The software part was that the strategy helped us to clarify values that were extremely critical in achieving our objectives. Secondly, the senior team provided the necessary climate because we had a framework of what we needed to accomplish. And then thirdly, it helped us to ensure that we had a culture, we led as a team an organizational culture that was responsive and directed towards achieving the organizational strategy that was there. So strategy was critical in helping us to achieve what we wanted to achieve in Kenya.
I mean, in Child Fund, accountability starts by talking to children. So we decide to talk to the child, to listen to the children, to understand, the situation he is living, his experience of life. And from that, we talk to the communities, and out of our discussion with the communities, we design the program response. Once that step is done, then we work together to qualify the resources that will help children to change their life. And those resources are developed, and a plan is settled for the national office, the partners who are engaged and are actors of their own change, children who are engaged and are actors of their own change to implement the program activities. From that point, the national office can reorganize its structure, develop the responsibility and the key task for all of the staff, and use that to monitor how we progress in delivering the response in one side, and in other side to see how our staff is performing and what kind of support they need. So this is the way we proceed, and that really helps in one hand to have a performance management system that will show that we are progressing toward the results, and then in the other hand to have children who really are benefiting from the results.
Sure. There has never been an organization in the history of mankind that has not taken risks and been successful. Risk is part and parcel to the entrepreneurial spirit, which is something Child Fund International has always embraced. But risk has to be embraced within limits of reason. Now, the good thing for Child Fund is that we are a mature organization. We have policies, procedures, systems, and we also have people who monitor from many different levels, whether the national office is reviewed by the region or by assurance or by IO. There's many levels of separation of duties and separation of powers. So taking risk is fine at Child Fund International. And a very good example of that, having mentioned Treasury and Kenya, is the fact that we took 20% of funds that previously were being handled directly by the headquarters and handed it over to the national offices. We took a risk, but we do believe that we have become much more effective. And with the systems and controls we have in place, I really feel it was a rational risk within reasonable limits, and from everything I've heard, it's worked out well.
I want to share with you a recent experience that I had. I made the decision of going to Kenya as an acting director, national director. It had a double positive result because in Mexico, I had to leave the sponsorship manager as acting national director. And for her, it was a great experience because she now has a broader knowledge of how to manage a national office. She could experience also to making decisions of a more global way than only the sponsorship. For me, going to Kenya, it was also an opportunity to share with the Kenya staff all the programs, lessons learned, and success of Mexico. I also share with them our fundraising in Mexico, and we had the opportunity also to exchange many experience and the programs that are being having in the Kenya office. I think this was a way of maximizing the value, so everybody learned about each country and had the opportunity to increase the work and to make a better work for the children.
I'm reminded every day that I didn't get to where I am today by myself. When I was growing up in the orphanage in South Korea in the 60s, my sponsor sponsored me for 6 years until I got adopted. And then once I got adopted, my parents raised me. And then even in my career, my wife, my better half, actually followed me so I could build my career. So I'm reminded every day that I'm not here because it's just me. And Child Fund, this really reminds me of Child Fund because Child Fund is one body, and that's the analogy I like to use, with many parts. Now, you can't say that one hand is more important than the foot. In my situation, actually, the hand helps my feet because I can't use my legs because I'm having polio, but my hands overcompensates it so I can walk using my hands. And sometimes when we're working, sometimes in an area, one department may say, hey, I need some help, and another department comes in to help. It could be the eyes that sees a need of a child in the field, and it could be the ears or the sponsor care that talks to that sponsor to help provides funds for the child. Or it could be the feet that the programs that delivers are good programs to the children in the field. So you can see that Child Fund is many parts of one body, and this is what makes the work possible. And by the way, that's much more fulfilling when you work together as a team because we cannot do our work by ourselves, and we need to do it with one body. And when one part of the body hurts, we all hurt. So that's why we need to come together as one. Child Fund is 1,500 employees worldwide. And without any of them, we cannot do the work. So we have to work together. And together, we can make a difference in the child's life of every deprived, excluded, and vulnerable children in our program countries. In fact, we're helping 18 million children and participants. And it's such a pleasure and honor to be able to work together as one, being one part of this body of Child Fund International.